global democracy has been surprisingly resilient in the 21st century. There is now a really broad consensus today that global democracy is in retreat. The well-known NGO Freedom House tells us that we've entered a period of global democratic recession and authoritarian resurgence. According to Freedom House, the world has experienced 16 consecutive years of democratic decline. Another leading democracy index, Varieties of Democracy, says we're in a period of global autocratization. That's a difficult word in English. I don't know about Portuguese. And V-Dem just published a report entitled Democracy at Dusk. So very dark. But take a look at the actual numbers. Where do things stand? Where does the world stand after 16 consecutive years of democratic decline? According to V-Dem's index, there were 93 democracies in the world 16 years ago. Today, there are 89 democracies in the world. That's a decline of 4 democracies. Freedom House shows a decline of 7 democracies. That is significant. But there are still more democracies in the world today than there were during the 1990s. According to V-Dem, there were 40 democracies in the world in 1980. There were 60 democracies in the world in 1990 after the fall of the Berlin Wall. There were 87 democracies in the world in 2000. Today, there are 89. So we are still living in the most democratic period in history. In Latin America, Venezuela, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and to some extent Brazil are less democratic than they were a decade ago. But Ecuador, Bolivia, Honduras, Colombia, and the Dominican Republic are more democratic than they were a decade ago. And the level of democracy in Argentina, in Uruguay, in Chile, in Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama, Peru, Paraguay, and Guatemala has remained relatively stable over the last decade. The number of democracies in the world more than doubled between 1985 and 2005. And in fact, democratization happened in totally unexpected places. Social scientists over the last half century have identified several factors that make democracy more likely to be born, more likely to survive. Industrialization, economic growth, a big middle class, a robust civil society, a dispersion of resources in society, low levels of inequality, a functioning state. Over the last 15 years or so, global conditions have changed. The rise of China, together with Russia's resurgence as an aggressive anti-liberal power, has altered the geopolitical balance of power, putting an end to that period of Western liberal hegemony. So autocrats across the globe now have external patrons again. At the same time, a series of events has eroded the power, the prestige, the self-confidence of the liberal West. The Iraq War, the 2008-2009 financial crisis, Brexit, Trump. So the days when the United States and Europe were the world's dominant military, economic, and ideological power, those days are over. And as a result, liberal Western-style democracy is no longer the only game in town. Aspiring autocrats across the world no longer fear international isolation because they can turn to China, to Russia, to other powers. International environment is far less favorable to democracy today than it was back in the 1990s. The global balance of power has shifted against the West, and Western democratizing pressure has largely disappeared. Given that change, given this increasingly unfavorable international environment, the fact that there are still 89 democracies in the world today suggests a fair amount of democratic resilience.